everyone, it's Darcy from Snails and Fairy Dust, and today I have a really fun project for us. It's perfect for all those people you know who don't wear jewelry but you want to make them something beaded. We're going to make these brooches, or you could call them bag charms. I've seen a lot of people wearing brooches on their bags lately. It seems to be trending. So we'll call them brooches or bag charms, but that is what we're going to make. We're actually going to make this one. And so you will need to get yourself a safety pin, a big safety pin like this, brooch pin. I got mine from Amazon and I will link that below. But we are going to make the entire beaded section before we attach it. So if you don't have your safety pin straight away, don't worry about it. You can do the whole beadwork and attach it afterwards. And I'll show you how to do all of that. The techniques we're using are, this is an odd count peyote stitch. And if you're not familiar with that, don't worry. I'm going to walk you through all of it. And then we're going to decrease the peyote stitch at the bottom here, which I will also walk you through. So don't worry. You could totally do this. I do recommend you have some beading experience. You don't want to just jump straight into this because you might get frustrated. So I would say it's like an intermediate project rather than a beginner. Also, I will be following a pattern. I've created a pattern for both of these brooches, and they're available on my website and my Etsy shop, and I will link them below. I have made them half the normal price to make it more accessible to everyone. But if you still do not want to have the pattern, that's perfectly fine, because you could still make a brooch in this shape by following along with us. And you can make up your pattern as you go, add different colors, maybe add stripes, but you can definitely follow along and still make a beaded brooch. It just won't be this specific pattern. Okay, so let's take a look at our materials and get started with this project. Okay, so first of all, I just want to show you a quick look at the pattern. This is what the pattern looks like. There's a visual pattern, and then there is the word pattern. And to follow along with the word pattern, people get confused, but your first actual row of beads you put on becomes rows 1 and 2. So I will show you that. I just wanted you to see in the pattern, this is what it looks like. And then when we get to the bottom part of the pattern, we will decrease. And that is when it will switch over here and you'll do the decreasing stitch. So as far as beads, I have 3 colors of beads here. I'm using size 11 Mikuki Delica beads. I have my safety pin, which is, it's a 2-inch safety pin. So, and I will link below so you could see the ones that I bought from Amazon. I have a size 12 beading needle, and I am going to use 6-pound weight Fireline. But you could use whatever beading thread you have. I just find this is really strong, and you want it to be strong if it's attached to a coat or a bag or something, because it could get pulled on a lot. So use the strongest beading thread that you can. I'm starting with 48 inches of my thread, but we definitely are going to have to add new thread at some point in this project because it's just a lot of weaving. So it doesn't really matter how much you start out with, because whatever you do, you're going to have to add more, and I will show you how to do that. So I've cut my thread. I am going to thread my needle. If you're using Fireline, it helps if you run it through your nails to really flatten it before you try to thread your needle. So that is my tip there. Thread my needle, pull the thread down about halfway, and then I'm going to use a different kind of bead just to create a stopper bead for the beginning of my peyote stitch. So I have this different bead that won't get mixed up with my other beads. I'm just going to pull that down towards the tail. I'm going to leave about 4 inches, and then I'm going to come back around, loop around, and come through the opposite side of that. And that's just going to create a bead that can sort of slide up and down, and it's just going to keep the beads from falling off. For the first row of this peyote stitch, it's going to be 23 beads. Now this is going to be odd count peyote stitch, as I mentioned in the beginning, and odd count has a bit of a tricky turnaround, but once you get the hang of it, it's not tricky at all. So get your 23 beads on your needle and then slide them down to that stopper bead. This is boring, watching me pick up beads, I know. Okay, so I have my 23 beads there. That is what they look like. I love the shimmer on these beads. And then we're going to slide it down. And then I like to take the tail and sort of wrap it around my finger a little bit. And then hold the other side between my thumb and forefinger. and you're going to skip that first bead, pick up one bead of your next row. Our next row has 12 beads, and we're going to bring the needle through the second bead. So we've skipped the first bead, brought it through the second bead, and you're just going to sort these out so that they form a little T. The first row never quite wants to sit. There we go. That's how we want it to sit. Whoop, not quite yet. We're almost there. Sometimes I need to use my needle. Okay, so pull that. And now this is what it should look like. You just want a little T there. And we're going to continue going down the row, picking up one bead at a time. So I'm picking up one more bead, skipping the next bead, skip that bead, and then bring my needle through the following bead, like so. And when we pull that tight, we're going to have another little T shape. I guess it's an upside down T, but it should look just like that. And we're going to do it again. Pick up one more bead, skip a bead, go through the next bead. Pull that tightly. And again, it sits right across like that. We're going to keep going down the line in this fashion. So picking up one more bead, skipping a bead, through the next bead. There we go. You want to keep your tension tight. Definitely want to keep it held between your thumb and forefinger like that so that you know those beads are nice and tight there. And you're going to keep working your way across, adding one bead at a time, skipping a bead, and going through the next bead. So skip a bead, go through the next bead, making sure that the end closest to you is very tight and secure. Take your time, make sure it lines up nicely like this, because this is your foundation row and you want it to be strong and sturdy. Otherwise you'll have gaps and everything will be a mess from there on out. So make your foundation strong. So I'm going to go a bit faster through this now. And then when we get to the end, we're going to have a weird turnaround because it is odd count peyote stitch. If you're familiar with even count peyote stitch, this should be pretty easy so far. And then now we're on this last bead, and we need to add another bead right across from that one at the end, but there's no bead to put it through. So what we're going to do is pick up a bead like so, and we're going to bring our needle down through, which is basically the first bead. It's the first bead we've ever used, and then down through the bead below it, and then down through the last bead we've just added. So it's coming at a bit of a diagonal like that. And then when we pull that, flip that little bead over. I said over. There you go. Then this is what it should look like, and looks just like the other row. But now we need to get back around to that last bead we've just added. And to do that, we're going to cross over to the first row, come up through that bead, and then come up through the bead directly above it. And then also through the very first bead, the one that's right next to our stopper bead. Now in this point, the stopper bead is getting in the way, so I'm going to pull it down. And we're just going to come right through that first bead. Again, making sure everything is nice and tight. Don't want any gaps in that bottom row. And now you should have something like this. And then we're simply just going to bring the needle back through that last bead we've added, like so. There we go. And that turnaround, I don't want you to scare you off. That turnaround is only going to be for that row. So the rest of this is much easier than that. So now I like to flip the work over so the tail is facing me, and then I'm going to work back up. So starting from closest to me, I'm going to add one bead in between each of these spaces we've created. So this row is going to have 11 beads in it. And in this particular pattern, it's going to go 5 pink and then 1 of the brown and then 5 more pink. So I'm just picking up 1 bead at a time, and I am adding the beads into these spaces. So the row before created these up beads, and then we're just adding beads right into those spaces. At this part of peyote stitch, I feel like is so intuitive, and it's so nice to just put those little beads in those spaces and have them click into place. There's that brown bead I talked about. It's very important with this stitch that you're using quality beads, because if your beads are not uniform, you're not going to get this look. So I'm using Mikuki Delica beads. You could use Toho beads are really great. Preciosa beads are great, but don't use cheap beads. So here we are at the end of this row again. We're going to flip over to work in the opposite direction. And this time we don't have a tricky turnaround. We're just going to work one bead into that first one. And again, working down this row, just adding one bead in between each of the up beads. So we're going to zoom through this, because when we get to the end of this row is where we're going to have the tricky turnaround. So it's always on the end where your tail is where there's going to be the weird turnaround. So now we're getting to the end of this row with the tail. Just coming through that one bead, not two. Pull it through. And now you see we don't have a place to add that next bead. So this is what we're going to do if I could hold on to my beadwork. So we're going to pick up one more bead. And then this time, in order to get it into that position, we're going to bring our needle right underneath that thread bridge on the edge. So bring it underneath that bundle of threads on the edge. Pull your bead through. And then get it where it's supposed to sit. So that's how we want it to look. And then to secure it, we're just going to bring our needle back down through it. Like so. Beautiful. And now we're going to flip it over and work in the opposite direction. So again, this is an easy one. We're just adding beads in between all of those other beads. And when we get to the end of this one, it's going to be a normal turnaround. But then the following turnaround will be the tricky one again. So we're going to look at that again. Don't worry, I'm going to show you a couple times. So we're just going to zoom through this. So it's always the row, the side of your beadwork that has the tail. That's where there's going to be the turnaround where you use the thread bridge. On this side, it's just a normal turnaround, if you don't get tangled up like I just did. So on this side, you see it's just picking up one bead and coming through that next up bead. That's all you have to do on this turnaround. Like so. And then we're going to zoom to the end of that row. And now we're at the end of that row. And now we're at the tricky turnaround again, which shouldn't seem so tricky now that we know the magic behind it. So I'm picking up my bead and I'm coming underneath that thread bridge right there, the closest thread bridge. Bring it right under there. Push the bead over. And then bring your needle back through that bead. There you go. And, make sure you are following your pattern if you are creating this pattern. It's also fine to just practice the stitch, get it down before you tackle a pattern. So now I'm zooming ahead because there's basically just several rows of that. You can get rid of your stopper bead. We keep going basically until row 56 like this, except I am going to have to change my thread. Somewhere in here, I run out of thread, and then we're going to stop, and I'm going to show you how to swap out your thread. I think here we are. Okay, so I've run out of thread. You always want to make sure you have like 4 inches left of thread. Don't wait till it's so short that you can't do anything with it. So I'm going to take my thread and just weave it back into the beadwork. Just work your way through one bead at a time, and then you want to change directions, which creates tension and keeps it from coming apart. I like to pick like 2 beads next to each other like this and wind around them a couple of times to really create that tension. And yeah, just take it in a few beads back until you feel nice and secure. And then you're going to clip that and then grab your new piece of thread. I'm going with another 48-inch piece of thread, and actually 2 pieces of 48 inches got me all the way through the end, but don't worry if they don't. So I want to start up a couple of rows away from where I need my thread to be. So I'm going to pull that through, leave myself a little tail that I hold with my thumb, and then I'm going to go through the reverse process. So just wrapping around a couple of beads to create that tension. And after you've done a couple, you're going to give your thread a good tug just so you know in your mind that it is nice and secure. And then you'll be ready to weave over to your starting point. So here, I'm giving it a good tug. That's not going anywhere. So I know I can now just work straight over to the edge. And I want to be exiting that last bead in that row there. And clip the thread. And now I'm just going to pick up my next bead, make sure you're following your pattern, and come back across that row and keep working that way. So now we will zoom through the rest of this, and join me back here when you get to row 56. I like watching the design come together this way. Don't we wish it really happened this fast? That would be amazing. Okay, so here we are, and we're ready to start decreasing our stitch. So in order to do that, we are going to come down 1 bead from where your thread is exiting. So my thread's coming out of that bead. I'm going down 1 bead from it, and I'm going to bring my needle through that bead and the bead directly above it to the diagonal. So I'm coming up through 2 beads, and then I'm going to come down again, so the bead directly below where my thread is exiting, and I'm going to come through that bead and the one directly above it, so up 2 at a diagonal, like so. And then this time, I'm going to go up 1 bead from the bead my thread is exiting. So up 1 bead and through 2 at a diagonal. And now I'm ready to start my row of decreasing. I'm just going to go straight across that row, only adding beads in between the up beads. And when I get to the end of that row, I will do that decreasing technique again. So working my way across this row. This part should be easy for you now. And now remember, don't add another bead at the end of that. We're going to decrease. So we're not adding that final bead. There's no more tricky turnarounds with the odd count. We go down 1 bead, through the bead below it, and then up 2 at a diagonal. Pull that tightly. And now again, down 1 bead, up 2 at a diagonal. If you can't get through 2 at a time, don't worry, just do 1. You don't want to break your bead. Take your time. Don't get mad at it. And then finally we go up 1 and then over 2 at a diagonal. Easy. And now we go back across that row again, just adding the beads in between. And I'm going to show you this one more time. Really get it stuck in your head. I think you need to do it 3 times, see it 3 times to really get it stuck. Okay, so here we are at the end again. And again, so we go down 1 bead, up 2 at a diagonal, like so. And then down 1 bead, up 2 at a diagonal. And see, I'm having trouble getting through 2, so I'm just going to pick 1 bead and then the next one, because you don't want to force it, because breaking your bead at this point would be a tragedy. And then finally, we're going to go up one bead, over two at a diagonal. And there you have it. And now we are going to zoom through the rest of this. The rest of this is all decreasing brick stitch, so no turnarounds on the end, the odd count turnarounds. And we're just going to zoom through this. This would also make a really cute bookmark, wouldn't it? I'm just noticed that. Okay, so now we're on our final one, and we're going to just add that bead at the end, like so. And this point, you could add a charm or some sort of bead at the end, but I'm just going to leave it like that, and I'm going to work my way down the edge. And now we need to get our thread all the way back up to the top. And that's you need to have at least, I would say, 12 to 15 inches of thread left. If you have less than that, then just finish this thread off and start a new one. But I have plenty here, and I'm going to work up the outer edge of this beadwork to get to the top. That's sort of the fastest route. So I'm going back and forth along that edge. And it also helps, this is the edge that didn't have the turnaround on the thread bridge. So if you look at your beadwork closely, the side that you turned around with the thread bridge will have more thread. So we're doing it on this side so that we don't add too much bulkiness to the outside edge there. And this will sort of even it out as well. So here I am at the top. I'm going to exit that top bead. But before I weave it onto the safety pin, I want to get rid of that tail from the very beginning. So the first thing you're going to do is take your needle off, thread it onto that tail, weave that tail back into your beadwork. And you're just going to do it the same way we did it when we started a new thread before. So just creating some tension and then clip it off. And then you can now rethread your working thread, and we're going to attach it to the safety pin. Make sure you're working on the side of the safety pin that doesn't open. And you also want to start towards the tail end of your safety pin. So I flip that around, and I'm going to take my thread. I'm going to come through the back of the pin and then through that next bead, like so. Pull it through. And get that nice and tight. And now I'm going to take my needle through the back of the beadwork, behind the safety pin, and then come through the safety pin again. So that thread is coming over the safety pin, and then through the next bead. Just go straight to the back there. There we go. And then through the safety pin again. So the thread's coming over, through the next bead, straight to the back. And then bring your needle through the safety pin and through the next bead straight to the back. Don't worry about it being too tight in the beginning, because you'll be able to tighten it up in a little bit. But just get your first 4 stitches on, and then you're going to give it a good tug and make sure things are starting to tighten up in there. So through the back, and then through the next bead to the back, towards the back, if you want to say that, and pull that all the way through, and then come through the safety pin again. So make sure that loop is going, the thread loop is going over the safety pin. And we're just going to continue that all the way down. Take your time. No need to rush in beading ever. And when we get to the end of this, we're going to adjust the tension a bit and make sure it's centered. And then we will turn around and go the opposite direction to just really secure it. Because like I said at the beginning, if you put this on a bag or put it on a coat, it could get pulled on in ways that your jewelry wouldn't, I would say. I think it needs to be a much sturdier sort of beading piece, because it can get a lot more wear and tear. So you just want to make sure this is really strong. So going through the back again. That's really bad camera work there. But hopefully you've got the point now. We're just working our way all the way to the end. Almost there. Through the front, through the next bead. When we go back in the opposite direction, I'm going to speed it up so you don't have to watch me go bead by bead. And here we are, almost at the last bead. We're going to come through that one. Pull it tightly. And then come back through one more time. And just go through that bead again. Just to make sure that's secure at the end. Okay, so now we're going to make sure this is tight. At this point, we could still move it a bit. We're going to make sure it's centered. So center it where you want it. And then we're going to give everything a really good tug and make sure that is tight on there. And now we're going to go through the opposite direction. So bringing our needle to the front, and then we're going to go through that next bead, straight to the back. And in this one, really make sure each stitch is tight. This is where we're going to really tighten this up. And then again, coming from the back to the front, and then through that next bead, straight to the back. Really make that tight. And we're going to keep going all the way across like this, through the next bead, through the next bead, straight to the back. And work your way across like that. You're going to get, you see this nice little, I don't know, like a sort of pattern happening at the top with the threads, where you see there's the two coming together. And it's really, it looks nice there, but it also is just making this piece super secure. So that is what it should look like when you get to the end. Again, make sure it is exactly where you want it to be, nice and centered. And then we're just going to work this thread back into our piece and make it nice and secure. We're so close to being done, guys. I wish it really happened this fast, but I actually like stitching these big pieces. I find it relaxing. And I do think this is such a nice present for someone who doesn't wear beaded jewelry. Also, I've seen so many people wearing pins and brooches on their purses these days. I like to take mine and put it on like a little, shopper bag. What do you call those? Like a tote bag. Decorate my tote bags with pins, and then it just feels a bit more fancy, because with that mom life, I'm always carrying a tote bag with like a water bottle and, I don't know, ballet shoes and random stuff, snacks. So it's just nice to have my tote bag looking a bit more fancy. And so now my thread is nice and secure. I'm going to give that a clip, and we are finished. So like I said in the beginning, you could add anything to the bottom. Like I was thinking you could add little accent beads. You could add a tassel, like an actual thread tassel, I think would be really cute. You'll see in this other one, I did play around with adding a little bit of fringe, and I had some of these like garnet beads I added at the end, where I just went, instead of adding that bottom bead, I just went back and forth and added a little bit of fringe there. So the possibilities are limitless, and I can't wait to see what you create. All right, bye. And if you like this video, please subscribe. It helps me keep this channel going. Thanks so much. Bye.